Good morning, Rabotai. Welcome to Breakfast in the Class. Breakfast in the Class today is dedicated in loving memory of Soraya Rahmani, Lilu Nishmat Sarah Bat Batya, from Murray and Norma Dayan and family. Also dedicated in the Zechut of the Refuah Shlema for Eliyahu Shimon Me'azav Fortuné and Chaim Rafael Ben Frida, and for the continued health of Chana Bat Sima Fega. The learning for this week is dedicated by the Torah Center Diamond donor Aaron Levayev, in loving memory of Nishmat Yohanan Yura ben Sarah Istat, Alava Shalom. Also, we have a tragic dedication. Let me see if I can pull it up. Be'ezrat Hashem, over here. It is Mechila. There was a very unfortunate story with a certain boy. His name is Elchanan Fasten, 19 years old, unfortunately in a terribly tragic car crash, and he passed away at the age of 19 years old. His grandfather reached out and asked if we could do the classes Linun Shmato Elchanan ben Yitzchak ben Tzion Alav Shalom. Hashem should bless us, Be'ezrat Hashem. We should know no more tsar, and we should have comfort in our lives, and that we should be safe on the roads. I just want to also shout out one other beautiful initiative. There's a young man. His name is, I think it's Moshe or Morty or Mendy Berkowitz. Mechila, I don't remember. I saw it only last night. And he's offering a challenge. This challenge is to all men, women, young, old, the Berkowitz challenge. And what is his challenge? His challenge is not to drink and drive. He made the biggest mistake of his life in his own words. He got into a car, he had a little bit to drink, maybe it wasn't even so much, but unfortunately he had a car crash. He killed someone, and someone was injured from that car crash. And I think the court case was this past week, and he's going to go sit in prison for God knows how long for this terrible lapse in judgment. And he's begging you to learn from his mistake and to have a zero tolerance policy with yourself and with others when it comes to getting behind the wheel of a car after you've had anything. The prisons are filled with people who said to themselves, it's only one drink, it doesn't affect me, I'm perfectly fine. And unfortunately they don't realize that the impairment can be even just a slightly slower response time, which in the split seconds that you have before a car accident, that's all the difference in the world between life and death, both your own and others. So the idea of taking this seriously, of making sure that if you see your friends over this period of time, a lot of people have a holiday season now. I'm not talking about necessarily Chanukah or the non-Jewish holiday. I'm talking about the fact that they're off of work and people go away on vacation and they want to enjoy themselves, and they can and they should enjoy themselves. People should get a break, whenever they go away. But sometimes that comes with a drink, and if that comes with a drink, there can never be keys involved, my friends. Take away your friend's keys, your spouse's keys, your parents, your children's, whatever it is. Should be a zero tolerance policy, because again, that extra 2 seconds or $5 that you saved is not worth the years that you'll sit in prison, the life that you'll ruin when you do this. So again, I'm not going to do this every day, but I just want to shout this out in the beginning of this time of year, that we should all learn from the tragic story. And this boy is shouting out to all of us, telling you, don't do what I did. So a worthy thing to do, even after the cards have been not gone his way. Please only answer amen if you're listening to this live. Baruch atah Adonai. Okay, let's begin. I want to share with you a fascinating insight, an insight that I believe needs to be expressed quite carefully in order for it to be understood clearly. So I'm going to choose my words carefully. I want people to understand what I mean and not to interpret or twist or misunderstand what it is that I'm putting across over here. We mentioned yesterday a very interesting expression, an expression that Yaakov communicates to Esav. And what's the expression? He says, Im Lavan garti, I lived with Lavan, ve'echara ad'ata And it took me until now. I got delayed there until now. And I was blessed with oxen, I was blessed with donkeys, etc., etc. So Rashi tells us, as we discussed yesterday, that Yaakov was not just telling Esav his financial, where he's been up to financially. Rather, in Lavan Garti means V'taryag mitzvot shamarti. I lived with Lavan and I kept the 613 mitzvot. I did not deviate. I didn't let the ball drop. I didn't stop with my prayers. I didn't stop with my learning. My mitzvot have not been affected by living v'lo lamarti, and I did not learn mima'asav araim, from his evil actions. Well, let me just share a story, and we'll share how this Dvar Torah begins. The Brisker Rav was once in a certain city, in Karinitsa. And he meets over there the rabbi of the city of Hamburg. And the rabbi asked him a question. He said like this: I don't understand. How is it possible that a person could live with somebody for 20 years and not be influenced? My wife for many years did not like avocado. I have people in my family, they didn't like olives. Someone else didn't like tomatoes. You know what happens? You're going to live around me long enough. Eventually, tomatoes are unavoidable. I have 7 children, 5 girls, 1 boy, and Heinz ketchup. These are my close family members. You're not going to live in my house for that long without eventually picking up something. And now she eats avocado. And now, she's still she's not on olives yet, right? But you pick these things up. You can't help it. Sorry? It's after 40. It's after 40. Yeah, certain things, eventually, you don't think it'll ever happen to you. You don't think you'll ever become a Met fan. But unfortunately, guy lives in your house who's also a Met fan, one of your children. Eventually, something happens to you. Baruch Hashem, our house is a pure Yankees only zone. But the point is, my friends, it's very, very difficult for a person not to be influenced. So how is it possible that Yaakov Avinu could have lived in that house for that long and lo lamarti mima'asav harayim? In fact, our Chachamim tell us, as we mentioned yesterday, oy lirasha, woe to the wicked, ve'oy lishcheno, and woe to his neighbor. You live in the proximity of a Rasha for long enough, you start picking up, whether you like it or not, his worldview, the way he talks, the way he behaves. So how is it possible that Yaakov could say a statement like this? Lo lamarti mima'asav harayim. I did not learn. Didn't happen. I did not learn from his evil actions. So, this rabbi gave the Brisker Rav a very interesting answer. He says, if we look carefully at the expression of Lavan, we see a very different way of perhaps perceiving the pasuk. Let's read it again. Im Lavan garti, I lived with Lavan, ve'echar ad'ata, and I've been here until now. I've been there until now. Lest you think that I was influenced by him, I kept all the mitzvot. I did not learn from his bad ways. You want to know how? Vayehi li shor v'hamor. Not that I had a donkey and an ox, but Lavan was to me a donkey and an ox. Let me ask you a question, because this is not really a Yaakov specific lesson. You live in America long enough, you become American. Even if you still speak with an accent, you become American. What does it mean to become American? I don't know if anyone here has ever been away on a Pesach program. You go to a Pesach program that's European. You'll notice something very odd, something very strange on a Pesach program that's European. You know what you'll notice? You'll notice that they only have meals at breakfast time lunchtime and dinner time. Very odd. Super strange item. You go to an American program, when do they have meals? Erev, vavoker, v'chol yom tamid, pa'amayim ba'ahava. There's never a time when you can't be eating 6 things. Never. And then, even after you ate the whole day, from the morning until the evening, if someone wants to eat and it's 1 o'clock in the morning, they have a new invention. And what's the invention called? A tea room. The only thing that's not in the tea room is tea. What's in the tea room? In the tea room is cake and jello, candies and sushi, fruit and who knows what. And when does this need to be open? The whole night, until the morning, when you have bridged to the next food object. This American excess, where did it get to? It got to me and you. It got to people whose grandparents came from Halab. I remember my father told me, he said, I was eating whatever I was eating at the Shabbat table. He says, have some bread with it. Have some rice with it. That's how we were, they were brought up. You had something that would fill you up that was cheap because they didn't have the money for you to sit there and eat only meat. So have some rice with it. Why do you think all the stews are on the rice? Not many of them, they didn't have the money. You go back to Europe and they had cholent. Where did cholent come from? Cholent came from the fact that they had no money, so they couldn't afford meat, not chicken. So they went to the butcher and they asked the butcher for the bones, and then they put bones in water, and then they added potatoes that cost nothing, and barley that cost nothing, and beans that cost nothing. And then whatever flavor could get sucked out of the bones would go into the food, and that was cholent. Just let's be clear, one more time. Let's be clear what we're talking about over here. We're talking about poor man's food. Now, you have 6 kinds of cholent. With this kind of meat and that kind of meat. With hot dogs, without hot dogs. By the way, always no hot dogs. Talk about American influence permeating to put a hot dog. To put a hot dog in a cholent is like putting a hot dog in your machshi. Right? Just don't even eat it. Right? Has v'shalom. So understand, my friends. Just understand what we're talking about over here. We got to a situation where things that were developed from necessity of poverty have now become staples of excess and luxury. So what do we have now? We have 25 different kinds of everything. I remember once upon a time, you got a gift for Chanukah. Now, every night, a kid asks, what do I get tonight? Well, what are we doing today? We did something yesterday. Yeah, but what are we doing today? Every day of Chanukah vacation, we have to be doing something. We need to be going away somewhere, right? What do you mean I have off? Okay, take a coloring book. Go kill your brothers and sisters outside in the lawn, like normal people, right? This is, we had a normal childhood. We didn't necessarily need every single second to be in a theme park, at an escape room. Again, just understand this idea. To spend $50 to take your children so they can be locked in a room, they can figure out how to get out. I have a secret for you. I can do that in my house for free. Lock you in the room, now figure out how to get out. We want to go to an escape room, no problem. Everyone into that room now. Right? Lock the door, khalas. The craziness that we have in our experience. We don't realize how these things slowly but surely permeate. So the question is, how in the world did Yaakov not get influenced by Lavan? But also for us, how do we not get influenced by a culture that we're in for so long? It seems impossible. The answer that we're learning today is, Vayihi li shor v'hamor. Lavan, in Yaakov's eyes, was not a human being. Now let me be clear. I do not mean to say that Jews considered non-Jews to be an ox and a donkey. That is not the message here. One more time, to be clear, that is not the message here. The message is, when someone, Jewish or non-Jewish, lives only for their physical desires, what are they? An animal. So when you look at that, what should you see? An animal. I mean, just to be clear, try this next time you go to a place. You order a salad. They ask you what kind of dressing you want. You tell you, what are the options? Used to be Thousand Island, garlic mayo. Now you could have an anxiety attack just from the list, right, of what's it called? Of optional sauces you could have on your salad. Never mind what you're going to have on your burger. It is unbelievable. But my friends, this is the world that we live in today. We live in a world where we are constantly attending to our animal needs. That's Vayihi li shor v'hamor. So Yaakov looks at this man Lavan. Every chance Lavan can get, he'll twist and turn the narrative so he could take more. What is that characteristic of? An animal who lives for self-preservation. So imagine you lived for a long time, 20 years, you lived with a horse. Is there ever a point where you start going to your wife or children? Did that ever happen? Look, 20 years, eventually it's going to rub off, right? Do you ever start, when a fly comes by your food, start moving your tuchus next to the thing, going like this, trying to move the fly away from your food? My horse, his tail moves like this to get the flies out. I thought I would do the same thing. After all, we've been together for 20 years, me and my horse. No one is influenced by a sheep, by a soos, a ferret, a donkey, a horse. No one is influenced. You can live with your dog for 20 years. No one was ever in their life tempted to start barking. When you see a person who's behaving like a dog, who's behaving like a pig, who's behaving, a Chazak, Frank, who's behaving like a pig, wants to take all the time, is never satisfied. You know how you make sure that you don't learn from him? You see this man, this woman, as a donkey, as a pig, as a horse, as a dog, not in a derogatory way. And this is the hardest part to get your head around. Nothing wrong with being a donkey. Adina loves her cat. Nothing wrong with being a cat. Nothing wrong with being a dog. If you were born a dog, then that's what you are. But if you were born a human, and you have the possibility of being more than that, then to be an animal is really underperforming. You see a guy, he's drugged out on the floor, on the street of the city. There's the little plastic rubber band on the floor next to him, surrounded by hypodermic needles. Look at this guy. Do you ever think to yourself, you know something? I really could learn from this guy. No, you don't. Because you understand that this person, not that you're judging him in a term of judging, but regardless, you have to see what is right in front of you as it is. Says the Pasuk, I lived with Lavan. My Torah and mitzvot was not affected. I never thought to speak like Lavan. You know why? Because I never thought to speak like my dog. This is not a derogatory thing. Now, my friends, just so it's clear, this is not a Jewish, non-Jewish thing. You meet a guy, every time you talk with him, he's only talking about money. You meet a person, every time you talk with him, he's only talking about a car, his new car, his old car, his old car which is about to be, his new car which is about to become his old car. He's only ever talking to you about clothing, about sports. At a certain point, you have to look at this person and think to yourself, this is not a human being. Now again, I don't mean doesn't have the dignity of a human being. I don't mean he's not human. I mean, he is not activating his human self. We all are part animal. All of us. The part of us that eats, we eat, also animals eat. The part of us that goes to the bathroom, we go to the bathroom, also animals go to the bathroom. We maybe go to the bathroom a little bit differently, but there's parts of us that are animalistic in nature. They are not governed by human intelligence and human heart. That is where humanness begins. We go back to this point many times. When the Jewish people leave Egypt, that's the holiday of Passover, Pesach. When the Jewish people receive the Torah, that's the holiday of Shavuot. Al Chachamim point out that on the holiday of Pesach, we bring a special korban called the Korban HaOmer. This Korban HaOmer that's brought on the second day of Maharat Shabbat, this Korban, what is it made out of? Barley. The Korban that we bring on Shavuot, the Korban of the Shtei HaLechem, is brought out of wheat. Say the Chachamim, how can we bring the Korban HaOmer out of barley and the Shtei HaLechem, the breads, the showbreads, how do we bring these two breads out of wheat? Because barley is ma'achal behema. Barley is the food of an animal. The barley was coarser. Who was that reserved for? You gave it to your animals. Wheat was finer, was more refined. Who'd you give that to? Human beings. Until the gluten-free people came along. But until that point, right? You had you gave wheat to humans. What we're being taught here is a human being, including a Jew, who does not have Torah, who does not have the process of self-refinement, of midot tovot, cannot conquer their anger, their impatience, their ego. They live as they are. An animal is someone who lives as they are. There is no process of growth other than what is naturally already there. Now you could have a guy who's humble and he's still an animal. You know why? Because he was born humble. The process of the 50 days receiving Torah is becoming human. Understand this concept for what it means. Your exhibition, your showing of your humanness is when you rise above your nature. If you're just fulfilling your nature, is there any difference between you and an animal? None whatsoever. Says Lavan to Esav, let me explain. You know how I wasn't influenced? Vayihi li, it was for me, shor and hamor. My friends, if we look at the excesses of American culture and we adopt those cultural realities as our own, then those excesses become ours. The idea that everything in this world is throwaway. That is not Jewish. Everything is one-time use only. Your contact lenses, right? Your cutlery, your plates, everything's one time. Throw it in the garbage. Your marriage, throw it in the garbage. Get a new one. Get a new one, get a new one, get a new one. We learn that here. In fact, the Torah says, remember that? Torah says, Bal tashchit. Don't waste anything. Yesterday I read an article in the news. It's talking about an economic crisis. And you know what is fueling this economic crisis? Americans, oh no, are holding onto their phones longer. They are using their phone from last year, this year. Oy, acharpa unashande. And it's throwing off the whole economy. Because you used your phone, which is a piece of technology that could literally communicate with satellites. Okay? Could do anything and everything on that phone. Could bring you, by the way, to Gan Eden and to Gehinnom, that phone, and you used it for 2 years instead of for 1 year. Used it for 3 years instead of for 2 years. People, oh no, are holding on to, and by the way, you know why we're holding on to our phones longer? Because we discovered that the phone manufacturers were building things in a way where your phone would become obsolete instantaneously, so you'd have to use a new phone because they basically were bricking your old phone. Once the court cases came out, they had to stop doing that. All of a sudden now, you could use your phone. Oh my gosh, shock, horror, for 3 years. You could keep your car. You understand how we've been lured in? I saw leases for 48 months for your car, then leases for 36 months, then leases for 24 months, then leases for 18 months. 18 months? I won't even remember what car I have yet. I haven't yet learned which buttons mean what in 18 months. I mean, I know AM radio until they took that away from me. 16 buttons you have to push just to get to the menu where you could stop roasting in your car because the heat is on, because your wife likes it 95 degrees in the car and you like it 72 degrees. Like a crazy person. Right? 18 months, that's what you, really? That's how long before you need a new car? My friends, I need you to understand what I'm telling you here. I don't care if you have a car, if you have a new car, if you have all new clothes, if everything is new and shiny and everything is throwaway. It's just one element of the culture that we live in permeating who we are. And you don't even notice it happening. You know, my father escaped from Syria. So I was a generation, the second generation from immigrant status. Many of the ideas of the old country were part of the way he raised me. By the time we got to my youngest brothers, the chinuch is completely different. I have someone else here, I'm sure you could tell me the same thing. Same thing with you? You're the oldest? You're one of the oldest? Okay? Have your parents and their mindset. It's like from east to west. And by the way, they don't even notice it happening. My own kids will say to me, we never would have got away with this, what she's getting away with. What happens, my friends? Slowly but surely, eats. Now imagine if your next door neighbor was not just an American guy, he was a cannibal. Would you start inviting people over for dinner instead of inviting people over to dinner? Because that's my neighbor, it's hard to resist, the influences. Vayihi li shor hamor. We need to. It was good, it wasn't that good. My friends, just understand, part of the way we reject the elements of culture that are around us. I'll give you another example. We're living right now in a city where anything you don't like, you take to the streets, you shut down traffic, you hold signs, you scream angrily at whatever you're screaming about. At what point, I think, one point, you see people, they're like, oh, well, they're protesting. So now we have to go protest. I don't know if that's the right thing or the wrong thing. All I want to know is, if you feel that they're being animals in the way that they're protesting, is the answer to that to join them in the mud? For sure not. When someone's going low, you know how when they go low, you go high? Not by you keep reminding yourself, don't go low. Just relate to them in the way that they are behaving. Sometimes you see parents do this. The kid is a kid screaming, crying, throwing a tantrum. Eventually what happens? The parent starts to throw a tantrum at the kid. They lost their patience. The father's yelling, screaming. The mother's like, they're 2 years old. They didn't sleep in 22 hours while we're traveling. Yeah, they're crying because they're a baby. Why are you screaming? Why are you becoming a toddler? This idea, Vayihi Lishor Hamor, is one of the most powerful lessons a person can learn in their defense mechanism against what is surrounding them. Sometimes your wife or your husband is acting like a shor or hamor. Again, not in a derogatory way. They're reacting naturally, and they're not reacting with their highest self, with their head or with their heart. They're reacting with their gut. Don't get dragged down into it. Don't bark too. Let me end with this, because I found this to be so interesting. And this is where the idea gets really brilliant. They asked a beautiful question. So I understand, right, how Yaakov was not influenced by Lavan, because this was his trick. He wasn't influenced by the sheep, so he wasn't influenced by Lavan, who he related to as a sheep. Trends. These are sheep. I don't have to do what they're doing. They're all sheep. I never thought to say, I'm not going to follow decisions for my child's future, because everyone else is doing something. Asks Rav Eliyahu Diskin, that's how Yaakov wasn't influenced by Lavan. How come Lavan wasn't influenced by Yaakov? And he answers something so brilliant. He says, if you ever had a chance to meet the Chafetz Chaim, it would change your life. People met the Chafetz Chaim for a Shabbat. Their lives will forever change because they met such a great tzaddik. Imagine you go to a hamor and you introduce the hamor to the Chafetz Chaim. You ask the hamor, so what do you think? You gave the Chafetz Chaim a ride. What do you think about the Chafetz Chaim? And the donkey says, about 120 pounds. What does the donkey think about the Chafetz Chaim? How much does he weigh? You know why? It's riding on my back. The Chafetz Chaim did not have an in-depth conversation with the donkey about the Mishnah Berurah. They didn't talk about the finer points of Lashon Hara. They didn't mention the Mashiach and the coming of the Mashiach, and is that donkey related to you? Because you guys may be the same family, the Mashiach donkey. No? Oh, you guys are not cousins. Okay, right? You didn't have this conversation. Because he's a chamor. Lavan looked at Yaakov Avinu, and what did he see? About 120 pounds. The same way you could look at him as a hamor, understand the hamor is also thinking that. If you've ever had an interaction with somebody where you've given to them and helped them and you were only nice to them, and then they turn around and stab you in the back, and you wonder, how could it be? How could they do that to me? Don't they know I've done this for them? I've done that for them. Don't they see what a good person, how kind I've been to? How could they? You know what they see? 120 pounds. That's what they see. Because they're behaving like a hamor. And a hamor sees things through the eyes of a hamor. What's a dog? A dog walks up to every person. Right? He smells you. Do you have any treats on you? That's what he wants to know. When he realizes you have no treats and you're not going to scratch his belly, he moves on to the next person. Don't you know people who are a kelb like that? Their only interest in a human being is, what can this person give me, do for me? So you want to know what they saw? They didn't see kindness. They just saw the things that you gave. The same way, you don't learn from it because it's that. Also, understand when it behaves a certain way, because that's what it sees. So the question is, if that's the case, I think we have a vessel, a way, an approach for how to look at the world with maybe a little bit of a different perspective. And not in a negative way, but just in a recognition that there are people who are living their humanness, and there are people who are living their animalness. And when someone is living their animalness, so there's nothing for you in your humanness to live. Super simple. At that point, you understand it for what it is. May Hashem bless us, Be'ezrat Hashem, always, to have these kinds of eyes, not of judgment, not of looking down on somebody or something. This is not a class thing or a religion thing. You could have someone who's non-Jewish who's living like a human. You could have someone who's Jewish who's living like an animal. When you understand where and why they are coming from, it allows you to maintain your own sense of self without being swayed to behave in the same patterns of behavior. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen. Rabbi Chananya ben Akasha omer,